I want to personally thank Caitlin Clark for lifting up our sport. She carried a heavy load for our sport.
Honestly, no disappointment. I think it just gives you something to work for. That's a dream. Hopefully one day I can be there, and I think it's just a little more motivation. You remember.
Get ready, because what we're about to dig into is nothing short of a gripping, unfiltered deep dive into one of the most explosive controversies modern sports has ever seen, the Caitlin Clark Olympic snub. And let me make this absolutely clear from the start. This isn't guesswork, rumor, or fan theory hype. Team USA has finally, and only after weeks of overwhelming public pressure and irrefutable evidence, admitted their deep regret in leaving the electrifying Caitlin Clark off the Olympic roster. Yes, you heard that right. Let that sink in. Truly let the scale of that misstep settle in your mind. For weeks, and I mean long, exhausting, tension-filled weeks, the sporting world practically erupted. From devoted basketball lifers who have decades of experience watching the game evolve, to brand new fans swept up by Clark's spectacular rise, everyone seemed to be shouting the same thing at Team USA. We begged them loudly, urgently, not to commit what we all saw as a massive, potentially historic mistake. A decision that would produce ripples for years, maybe decades, shaping not just the roster, but the global perception of women's basketball itself. We pleaded with them to look past the traditional metrics, past the narrow short-term view, and recognize the enormous, culture-shifting force Caitlin Clark represents in the rapidly changing world of women's sports. And then came the twist, shocking, surreal, the kind of narrative curveball you only expect in fiction. They didn't just quietly acknowledge the error behind closed doors. No, reports say they're now paying for that decision with a brutal hit to their public reputation. They're getting hammered with criticism from every possible angle. And in a stunning turn, they're even issuing something close to a public apology. The irony is almost painful. From a mind-numbing initial snub to the fallout now playing out in real time, the entire saga feels like a blend of poetic justice and maddening frustration. Even Indiana's coach, someone who sees Clark's influence and brilliance up close, delivered a haunting, almost prophetic line to her. They unleashed a monster. Stop and consider what that actually means. A monster of absurd talent, jaw-dropping skill, and unmatched dominance. A monster of unprecedented popularity, pulling in viewers like a gravity well, packing arenas, turning casual observers into devoted fans. A monster of transformation, fundamentally reshaping how people see the sport and inspiring an entire new wave of athletes and supporters. And let's be very clear here. This isn't fan bias or overblown excitement. This is fact. Christine Brennan, the renowned best-selling author and veteran sports journalist, dissected the situation in a blistering USA Today column. She didn't sugarcoat a thing. She wrote, and I quote directly, "I've seen some bad team and athlete selection decisions in the 40 years I've covered the Olympics. But this is the worst by far." Just absorb that for a moment. And she wasn't finished. She delivered an even sharper, almost coldly sarcastic blow by suggesting that maybe we shouldn't be shocked at all, because the only amateurs left in the Olympic Games appear to be the people running them. A devastating line. A perfect, ruthless summary of just how disconnected the decision-makers seem from the realities of modern sports. Sure, some voices like Gemma Hill from The Atlantic tried to add nuance, noting that maybe we're overly panicking. But even Hill, with all her thoughtful analysis, conceded that Clark's future on the Olympic stage is inevitable. And I agree completely. It's not a possibility, it's a certainty. It's only a matter of when, not if. But the regret radiating from Team USA right now, it's unmistakable. It's heavy. It's the weight of a monumental missed opportunity, the kind you don't often get back. And one of the biggest reasons for that regret, something Stephen A. Smith has been hammering home with fiery precision. You cannot, absolutely cannot, ignore the marketing side of this equation. That's where Team USA didn't just stumble, they fell flat on their faces. They fumbled the single most obvious, golden, once-in-a-generation chance to elevate the sport on a global scale. That failure right there is the true heart of this entire controversy.
apologizing. You make decisions, marketing. I want people watching. I want eyeballs. I want advertising dollars. Why? Because he'll get paid. Y'all will get paid. And guess who else will get paid? You see where I'm coming from? That's what it's about. Stop acting otherwise. We know this. You don't sit up there and pass on Caitlin Clark. It was stupid, Team USA. It was a dumb decision. Everybody, there's always somebody that's a sacrificial lamb. I respect the hell out of Rebecca Lobo and what she broke down. I understand it. It was a stupid decision because it compromises what your ultimate goal is, which is to elevate the WNBA.
Let's cut through the noise for a moment and be brutally honest. Stephen A. Smith, a man famous for his explosive delivery and dramatic flair, may not always choose language that would impress a panel of Harvard professors. But the underlying point he was making, the core truth he was shouting from the rooftops, I stand with that entirely without hesitation. You don't need a polished MBA, a degree in sports economics, or even a semester of Marketing 101 to understand the most glaringly obvious fact in modern athletics. Caitlin Clark is a ratings powerhouse. Undeniably, unquestionably, absolutely, the math is embarrassingly simple. When a player, game after game, week after week, draws monumental crowds, posts earth-shattering TV ratings, dominates every trending topic, and electrifies every corner of sports media, then common sense alone tells you the outcome. Adding that kind of superstar to Team USA, a roster already loaded with elite talent and admired worldwide, would have only one outcome. Women's basketball would rocket to a level we've never seen before. Not inch forward, explode forward. We're talking about a once-in-a-generation marketing and cultural opportunity. A chance to introduce the sport to millions who have never watched it. A chance to turn casual observers into lifelong fans. A chance to make women's basketball a global force. And yet, despite all of that, she was missing from the Olympic roster. Her absence wasn't just surprising, it was genuinely baffling. A decision so confusing, so counter to logic, that even seasoned analysts were left scratching their heads. But the story goes deeper, and yes, more unsettling. A moment where legendary WNBA icon Diana Taurasi expressed, with subtle but unmistakable conviction, that Clark wouldn't immediately dominate the pros, and certainly wasn't ready for the Olympic stage. It wasn't said outright, but it didn't need to be. The energy, the tone, the facial expressions, the guarded posture told the whole story. It felt like more than basketball. It felt like a veteran trying to protect an established hierarchy from a rising phenomenon whose sudden fame was rewriting the landscape. This wasn't just about talent. It was about what Clark represented, a shift in power, a change in visibility, the dawn of a new era. The kind of shift that can make even the greatest players uneasy. And speaking of unease, let's talk about Cheryl Reeve. Not rumor, not gossip, visible, observable behavior. During a heated Lynx versus Fever matchup, her reactions were hard to ignore. Her sideline demeanor toward Clark didn't just look competitive, it looked personal. The tension was thick. The frustration was obvious. To many viewers, this felt like more than a standard coaching rivalry. It added yet another layer to the mystery of why Clark was left off the team. Then came the official explanation from Jennifer Rosati, chair of the National Team Committee. Finally, some clarity, or at least an attempt at it. She insisted the selection process was meticulous, multi-year, and based on rigid criteria. But then came the sentence that stunned essentially everyone. Television ratings and popularity were not considered. Let that sink in. The most popular women's basketball player on earth, in a global event that depends on viewership, wasn't evaluated on the very thing she excels at more than anyone. And that single detail effectively cut Clark out of contention before the debate even began. Which brings us to the real-world proof. The numbers. Team USA's attendance at the Olympics was shockingly low. Dramatically lower than Spain versus China. Dramatically lower than Nigeria versus Australia. Team USA, the super team, was drawing barely half the attendance of other games. A glaring sign of the void left by omitting the most magnetic star in women's sports. And yet Clark's response? Pure grace, pure composure, pure professionalism. No bitterness, no complaints, no shots fired. She even watched the Olympic Games religiously, cheering Team USA on, supporting the players, absorbing the moment as motivation. When asked about disappointment, she simply said, "For years comes fast." That's not just maturity, that's star power. That's leadership. What makes the committee's defense even harder to accept is the fact that legends like Taurasi, Stewart, and Parker all played Olympic basketball before ever playing a minute in the WNBA. That precedent exists. That door was open. That pathway was established. So why was it closed now? And then came the bombshell. A selection committee member openly admitted during the Olympics that hindsight proved they should have chosen her. After watching her shatter records, including a 19-assist game, they realized she should have been on the roster. This wasn't just regret. It was an admission of a colossal mistake, a generational mistake. Because Clark doesn't just score points. She moves culture. She fills arenas. She inflates ratings. She brings in sponsors. Her absence didn't just remove a player. It removed momentum, excitement, global attention. It removed one of the most powerful engines the sport currently has. Her impact is so massive that even fans from other countries held up signs saying, "You need Caitlin Clark to beat us." Imagine that. International fans acknowledging her influence louder than her own Olympic committee. And yet, through all the noise, Clark stayed locked in. Calm, focused, driven, not defeated, motivated. She is improving rapidly, adjusting quickly, and rewriting record books before our eyes. And because of that, the next 4 years hold massive implications. Will Team USA finally embrace the future? Will marketability finally be acknowledged as real value? Will Clark return not just as a roster pick, but as the face of the team? History tells us this. Athletes who get snubbed don't disappear. They come back stronger, louder, more unstoppable. And that brings us to the real question, the one only you can answer. Did leaving Caitlin Clark off Team USA hurt the Olympics? Did it hurt viewership? Did it hurt the growth of women's basketball? And will she dominate the next Olympics? Drop your thoughts below. Your voice is part of this story. And if you enjoyed this breakdown, don't forget to like, subscribe, and turn on notifications so you never miss another deep dive. Thank you for being here. Your support means everything. And circle the date, August 16th. Clark versus Taurasi. Indiana Fever versus Phoenix Mercury. A matchup you absolutely cannot miss. It's going to be fireworks. There's a deeper, more complicated layer to this entire story. One that most fans never get to see, one that rarely gets reported openly, but one that insiders whisper about constantly. Because the truth is this. The Olympic snub wasn't just a selection mistake. It was a collision of power, personality, politics, and a shifting landscape that none of the traditional gatekeepers were fully prepared for. To really understand what happened, you have to zoom out, way out, and look at the WNBA and USA basketball not as teams, but as systems. Systems that have operated the same way for decades. Systems built on seniority, loyalty, hierarchy, and respect for the legends who established the league long before a rookie like Caitlin Clark arrived. These systems reward experience. They reward time served. They reward those who have been through multiple Olympic cycles, multiple training camps, multiple overseas seasons. And then suddenly, like a meteor hitting the surface, Caitlin Clark entered the picture. A superstar so big, so fast, so disruptive that the entire power structure started vibrating on impact. Her college games outrated NBA playoff games. Her jersey broke sales records. Her WNBA games were selling out arenas that had never been full before. And her highlight reels weren't staying inside the U.S. They were going viral in Europe, Africa, Asia, South America. When she touched the ball, the world stopped scrolling. But here's the thing nobody wants to admit publicly. When a star rises too fast, the system around them panics. Because systems don't like surprises. Systems like control. And Caitlin Clark, whether she meant to or not, broke the system. Behind the scenes, executives were asking questions that don't normally get asked about rookies. How will her presence shift the spotlight? Will veterans feel overshadowed? Will marketing revolve around her instead of the team? Will she draw so much attention that it becomes uncomfortable for players who have been here longer? Will her media power become stronger than the league's own control? These are not basketball questions. These are power structure questions. And whenever those questions appear, tensions rise. Rumors began circulating months before the roster announcement. Quiet conversations, players venting privately, executives worrying about balance, coaches debating whether adding Clark would bring excitement or chaos. Some believed she would inspire the team. Others feared she would disrupt chemistry. A few believed she wasn't one of them, yet that she hadn't earned her place the way previous generations had. This is not unique to Caitlin Clark. It's human nature. When someone new instantly becomes the face of a movement, people get nervous. And this nervousness only grew when Clark's fan base exploded into one of the most powerful forces in modern sports. Her supporters weren't just cheering. They were demanding. They were online. They were vocal. They were organized. And they were turning every slight, real or perceived, into a headline. Every foul became a controversy. Every hard screen became a debate. Every awkward quote from a veteran turned into fuel. Some players began feeling like they couldn't breathe without their words being interpreted as jealousy or hate. Some coaches felt like any comment about Clark would be twisted. Some executives feared that this attention bubble would burst in a bad way. So when the selection committee sat down to finalize the roster, the unspoken tension in the room was enormous. Yes, they had their criteria. Yes, they had their evaluations. Yes, they had film metrics, reports, scouting notes. But hovering above all of that was one enormous elephant in the room. What happens if we choose her, and what happens if we don't? If they added her, the media circus would be unimaginable. Every practice would be filmed. Every veteran would be compared to her. Every lineup decision would be debated. Every mistake would become global news. If they left her off, fans would be furious. Ratings could dip. Global interest might waver. The Olympics could miss out on a generational moment. They'd be accused of gatekeeping, jealousy, pettiness. Either way, it was a storm. But here's something even more shocking, something most people don't know. Insiders say the committee briefly discussed creating a special marketing roster just for the Olympics. A roster designed not only for basketball excellence, but for growing the game internationally. A roster where Clark would have been a guaranteed selection. The idea was bold, revolutionary, and instantly rejected. Why? Because USA basketball has never operated that way. They use tradition, not trends. History, not hype. Experience, not entertainment value. That's the flaw. That's the outdated system. And that's how Caitlin Clark slipped through the cracks. But here's where the story turns even more wild. When Team USA arrived in Paris and saw empty seats, half-empty arenas, games with shockingly low attendance, they realized something profound. The world wanted Caitlin Clark, and the world noticed she wasn't there. Even players on other national teams were confused. Some were upset. Some were stunned. Some joked, some didn't. Some said publicly what everyone was thinking privately. Why isn't she here? And while all this was happening, Clark was back home working, studying film, training, watching Team USA with admiration, not resentment, not pettiness, not ego, just pure focus. Because greatness doesn't need bitterness. Greatness prepares. More powerful than any snub? Her response. More legendary than any medal? Her maturity. But here's the most important twist, the part that will define the next Olympic cycle. The committee will never again be able to say ratings don't matter. They will never again ignore global demand. They will never again overlook the cultural impact of a single superstar. Caitlin Clark changed the rules, even without stepping foot in Paris. And the deeper you look, the clearer it becomes. This wasn't just a snub. This wasn't just a missed opportunity. This wasn't just a controversy. It was a turning point. The moment women's basketball finally realized that the future doesn't belong to the system. It belongs to the stars who redefine it. And Caitlin Clark is one of those stars. Part 3 will go even deeper, the economics, the power struggle, the social dynamics, the unspoken rivalries, and how this decision will impact the next decade. Just say the word,